Right. Gentlemen,
Don't mind if I do.
cheers.
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 Ooh.
We're allowed to do this. So
Home again.
welcome everybody to Accelerate. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel. I'm joined by Dan Callaway, who is the master blender for Lofted Spirits, Bardstown Bourbon Company, and Green River, and Chuck Morton, who is the founder of Whiskey Advisors and the managing director of the North American Whiskey Fund. Chuck's fund has bought and is continuing to buy thousands of barrels from Lofted Spirits from their different distilleries. And we're going to talk about my favorite subject, whiskey. So I put this up there, but I don't know if you guys know the history. Whiskey truly is America's original cryptocurrency. It was a store of wealth, a proof of work, and it was ultimately used as a medium of exchange. So kicking this off on the economics, Chuck, you're actively deploying capital right now into whiskey barrels. More traditional assets are having, a little bit of pressure, shakeups, fears about different types of international trade. What makes now such an attractive time to be deploying capital?
It's what we would call a buyer's market, right? Much like real estate, when it's down, it's a good time to buy. So right now we're wrapping up investments on strategic barrels produced by folks like Lofted Spirits for North American Whiskey Fund, and we're targeting a 28% IRR on a 4 to 5 year term.
Excellent. So with the increased expansion of liquidity that comes from, tokenizing barrels, bringing them on chain, who stands to benefit the most from across the supply chain?
Well, I think that gets spread out between, investors. They get a high yield because of the lower price points. The brands get growth, and the consumers, they end up with a better, more flavorful product.
And that's ultimately what we like to focus on, is that full stack at Baxis, going from all the way from the producers down to the consumers and making sure that everyone gets to enjoy great whiskey. So on the topic of great whiskey, Dan, you've spoken about your living library approach towards blending. Can you explain to the audience a little bit what goes into the curation, hundreds of barrels being blended together from different rick houses? What makes maturation such a creative process?
Yeah, so I'll start by just saying thank you for having me. And Bardstown Bourbon Company, we positioned ourselves as being the modern take on a traditional industry. So we are all about innovation, collaboration, and transparency. Those are our tenets. We have the most technically advanced distillery in the country. So when you talk about the forward-thinking blending and how we pull barrels together, traditionally, if you have a blend of 500 barrels, you're literally going through and tasting every single one, handwritten notes. What we're able to partner with is to digitally track these barrels, map these barrels, and have historical data where we can put them together and be more efficient and ultimately get to a better product with our blends.
I love to hear it. I love to drink it also. But that's a big part of our Athena product that we have at Baxis, which is this using helium basically to track barrels in the rick houses, temperature, humidity, all of the factors that actually go into maturation. And so what would you say, Bardstown's been around for a couple of years, producing and now releasing your own whiskeys. Green River has relaunched recently, but a very, very long history in American whiskey. For new brands and smaller, distilleries, what are the biggest pain points when starting up commercially?
Yeah, so the primary pain point, if you're getting together and you want to start a whiskey brand, where Bardstown positioned was a solve for that pain point, and the pain point being that you would essentially have 20 of the same bourbons on a back shelf with the same label, the exact same liquid, and they're not able to say where the liquid came from. That's because historically, if you wanted to purchase liquid, you would have a large distillery's leftovers. They would just sell you their excess. What Bardstown created was true custom distillation, where we can target 500 points of production, everything from the yeast, the barrel, the temperature off the still, the fermentation length, And now you're like a chef coming in and using our kitchen, and you're truly making your own whiskey. But the most important thing is through transparency, you can lay out exactly how you did it and created your own flavor profile. So the number one pain point being all the bourbons are the same, we've solved that.
I love that. And on that note, so obviously the new products that we're using at Baxis with Bardstown, you featured them, the dashboard, where you're able to actually go into your rickhouse digitally without having to leave your office, see what's going on across the different barrels. And that produces like an interesting question now, because now users have that provenance and that transparency about knowing the end customers, the buyers, those brands, about what they're buying. So Chuck, how do you view barrels as financial instruments in this model, in this world, in a world where you have distilleries producing not just bulk excess now, but like Bardstown, really custom products for brands? And especially with this type of transparency and traceability, how has this changed the whiskey trading world?
Sure. So, I kind of view these maturing barrels like a maturing bond. And at the end of the day, the upside for the investors matures just like a bond, except it's more predictable. It's extremely predictable over 4 to 5 year term. We know that it's excessively good juice, which is a term we use in this industry. Sorry. It's some of the best bourbon whiskey on the planet, and by being able to track those details, just like a bond, we're tracking this all the way through the process and able to get good returns for investors.
And have you found, a month or so ago, there was a couple of Scottish whiskey funds actually blew up. They, and the issue was that the owners, or the people who thought they owned these barrels, discovered that the barrels didn't exist. Have you found that there's more openness with the tracking and the traceability for regular consumers to feel, that they have more control and they know what they're purchasing, that they feel like they can actually see what's in their rickhouse?
Oh, absolutely. With the detailing that the tracking is able to provide, UCC filings, and it's in warehouses, bonded warehouses, like at Bardstown Bourbon Company, it's a very, very safe investment.
I love it. And Dan, using that same traceability, so we know how the financial side works of it, how does that change, or how do you think it will change your approach towards blending and maturation?
Yeah, so it's interesting, when you talk about blending in Kentucky, you've got to imagine a warehouse that is 7 stories tall, a 25-degree difference from top to bottom, and completely unique barrels. Every one is different in different locations. So what Baxis is providing us is a way that we can track development and flavor, know the humidity, the temperature, the change, and how that affects extraction, and then we can basically future-proof our blends. And then when that barrel comes out of the rickhouse, we know what liquid to put in that spot, and we can customize that with our partner brands. If someone wants to come out with something in 4 years with a rich sugar profile at a high proof, we'll know exactly where to put them. And it's not just intuition, it's backed up by traceable data.
So Dan, you were just a big star on 60 Minutes. They leaned into your Cathedral French Oak project. Can you share a little bit about what made that particular release so unique?
Yeah, so it's that same dichotomy, right? Bourbon is the traditional American spirit, but what we're seeing now is these explorations and innovations in flavor. So the one you referenced that was featured on 60 Minutes is we took wood, basically when Notre Dame caught fire, the French government set out to find the best trees in France, and they identified this certain plot of land in the Bercé forest used to repair Notre Dame. There was a tiny bit of wood left over after the repair, and we brought that over and made barrels out of this 300-year-old wood, the oldest wood in France, with a tight grain, and made this incredible release we called the Cathedral. And we figured it was a one-off, so if there was any litigation, it was no problem with a cease and desist. It's out the door.
Excellent. And so bourbon, when it's made, can only go into fresh, newly charred barrels. So, these are 300-year-old French oak. Are you guys still using them? What are you doing with those barrels afterwards?
Refilled them immediately. A big thing in bourbon is finishing, right? So we just did the first American whiskey finished in Indian whiskey barrels, and we're seeing this cross-collaboration. So initially, yes, new charred oak to start, but then you can go into any sort of finishing, and that's another way we can just track data and see how these are developing.
Awesome. I have dibs on them when you're done.
Okay.
So,
Wait.
and no, Chuck, I've got them. They're mine. And then with that same idea, that traceability, how do you see liquidity and really the capital markets of whiskey evolving from, I mean, you do audits and appraisals. How long do those take you? You go in and you have to manually count each barrel in a rickhouse?
Yeah, it's an arduous process for large banks, accounting firms, lenders. Yeah, you have to track each barrel. Each barrel has its own position. It's registered with the federal government. They want their tax at the end of this process, right? So everything is tracked. It's very tangible. That's the whole key to this. It's a tangible asset that can be tracked, as we've talked about. It's made by some of the best folks in the world. And being from the woods of Eastern Kentucky, there's nothing better.
So Chuck, you're about to be closing out another fund. You've already managed funds that have done hundreds of millions of dollars of whiskey barrel transactions. What does it look like on the liquidity side? Because it's one thing, you've got, I buy barrels of whiskey because I want to bottle them, we want to release them on access to consumers. But what does that look like when a brand is trying to finance their operations?
Sure, so the brands can be somewhat restricted by putting out the capital because these barrels are not inexpensive. So we like to come in, purchase a large swath of barrels from folks like Lofted Spirits, and then 4 or 5 years down the road, they acquire them from the fund, meeting our intended IRR. It's saved them the carry cost for 4 or 5 years, and it's a winner for everybody.
Amazing. So you're saying pretty liquid.
It's very liquid.
Excellent. So final thoughts on this. We're moving on from the traditional side of whiskey, but not away from it. People talk about speed aging. It's a myth, and it's really not good. I'm not a fan of that, but we are moving into this more technologically driven future of how whiskey will improve. Whiskey will continue to evolve, and it's exciting, really exciting to hear, Dan, what you guys are doing at Lofted Spirits. You guys have, like you said, really been at the forefront of producing these advanced techniques and advanced technology to be able to improve the customer and the user experience. And so obviously at Baxis, we're here to provide investor confidence, knowing that their barrels are there, to help the distilleries for their maturation and tracking, and ultimately to help consumers get better products at better prices on our marketplace.
To add on to that, I think it's important that through Baxis we can tokenize these barrels. Very important for tracking measures. It all ties into the final product, again, providing more security in the investment. Yeah.
Amazing. And just, Dan, to close it out, I mean, ultimately, as the master blender, when you're looking at a product, obviously there's the financials, there's the product side, the numbers, but ultimately you're focused on the consumer experience, what they're getting, so what is it that you feel like this whole process will help consumers learn from through that traceability and transparency?
Yeah, so it's something that's never been done before, and we're about to release it, where as a consumer, you can look at your bottle, your blend, and you will know the entire life cycle and history of how your barrel aged, every component, and you can really dive in and appreciate that flavor. And I truly feel what we're creating together will be the standard in the spirits industry within 10 years. It's just fun to kick it off.
Amazing. Well, Chuck and Dan, thank you so much for joining me and raising a glass to Solana and Accelerate. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for putting me in the middle.